Hey, how you doing, Mario? Doing good. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Doing, Dave? getting
Zero.
started tonight. Good. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This special meeting of the Board of Directors. It's May 26, 2022. Let's call the roll, please.
Director Roberson,
Here.
Director Anderson,
Here.
Director Mallet,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Adams,
Here.
Chair Paul.
Here.
All directors are present.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions
There are no
or corrections
changes.
to the?
Yep, there are none.
Okay. Let's see. We do have one item on the right thing. One item on consent, and that's the minutes to the special and regular board meetings. Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So move.
I'll second.
Aye.
You.
And
You call
Joelle, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's vote on the consent calendar
Okay.
motion.
I'll take it out for a roll call vote. Director Edwards,
Approval.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Mallet,
Yes.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul. Chair Paul,
Yes.
the motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
Is Joelle, it seems to be a Joelle's in as far as
Good, Gracie.
you're frozen, Joelle.
I'm frozen.
Are you frozen, Karen?
Director Paul, on our end, we're showing that you may have some low bandwidth. I'm not sure if you want to try to join in by phone or disconnect and then rejoin, and then we could have Vice Chair Adams chair this meeting. So
I'm afraid. So it's my bandwidth, you say?
yes,
Just if you try turning off your video, you'll probably be fine.
Yeah, let me
And
try
then you
that.
can continue to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Here's
Try.
more chicken.
And while you're doing that, would you like,
Okay, on to
would you like me to introduce the action item?
I didn't hear what Dave said, and it's probably connection. For me?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce item 2. This is an action item. As you know, this is intended to be a budget workshop, but in light of the promulgation of new rules by the State Water Resources Control Board at their Tuesday meeting related to drought, we are bringing forward to you a resolution for your consideration to support the state's executive order and the rules promulgated by the State Water Board. And Stephanie Locke will be making a presentation.
Thank you. Joelle, do you have our PowerPoint ready, please? So this evening, the board will be considering adoption of resolution 2022-15, triggering stage 2 water conservation in response to the State Water Board's order. Next, please. Just to start out my presentation, I wanted to give you the most recent information about the state's current drought situation. This map came out earlier today and shows that basically the entire state of California is currently in severe or greater drought, according to the information that's provided here. There's obviously this big swath down in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley. Monterey County is for the most part in what is considered severe drought. Although locally, our situation, because we have local water supplies, is much different than a lot of the main part of the state that relies on snow melt and water coming from other state water projects. So along the coastline of California, many of the water agencies have basically stated that they're able to continue through the drought right now, that they don't have a water emergency, but the state has kind of requested that everybody message, get the word out, encourage people to save water. We don't know how long it's going to be that we have minimal rainfall during our winters, and everybody needs to be a part of this effort. Next. So March 28th of this year, Governor Newsom directed the State Water Resources Control Board to adopt emergency regulations by May 25th. And his executive order directed that each urban water supplier, and that is a defined term, CalAm is the urban water supplier for the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. Our neighbor Marina Coast Water District is also an urban water supplier. They must submit a preliminary annual water supply and demand assessment to the state by June 1st. And he directed that they be required to implement stage 2 of their conservation plans and ban irrigation of non-functional turf in commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors, and included homeowner association common areas as part of that ban. Next. So the State Water Resource Control Board met Tuesday and adopted emergency water conservation regulations. Large suppliers must implement stage 2 by June 10th. And it also bans the irrigation of non-functional turf. As I mentioned in the previous slide, non-functional turf is ornamental grass. It's not regularly used for recreation purposes or community events. And this does not include sports fields. The ban does not include watering turf that's used for recreation or other community uses. And it also does not prevent irrigation of turf at residences or to maintain trees. So coming out of the last drought, I think that was one of the things we found was very important, is to maintain the health of our trees. And so if there are trees, they need to continue to be watered. Next. So the resolution that the board is considering this evening basically would move us to stage 2. We are always in stage 1 of our plan. That stage 1 is essentially our water waste prohibitions. And as I mentioned previously, that our local current supply conditions don't put us in a place where we have really a need to move to stage 2 at this time. We are doing it because of the state order. So resolution 2022-15 moves CalAm to stage 2, which is called a voluntary reduction in use. And it would be essentially using the regulatory trigger, which is that it was required by the state. The effective date would be June 1st, 2022, although it appears that the state, because they have to go through legal review of the resolution and rules that were adopted, will not actually trigger the stage 2 requirement for water suppliers until June 10th, although the ban on ornamental turf will take place as soon as the review has been completed. But we'd like to go ahead and move forward on June 1st. Staff has been coordinating with CalAm on implementing this plan, and Patrick Pills and Josh Stratton from CalAm are on our participant list this evening. And I also met with the Monterey County Hospitality Association this morning to kind of go over what our expectations are for our restaurant and hotel industry. And I will be working with them to move forward and get make sure everybody knows what is required. Next. So as I mentioned previously, we are always in stage 1, and stage 1 are water waste prohibitions. Examples, and I'm going to go through just a list of the most common water waste situations that we see: correctable leaks, breaks, and malfunctions. And in most cases, those are given a 72-hour notice that they need to correct within 72 hours. And if they do not correct the problem within 72 hours, then they would be cited as a water waste violation. Properties that allow over irrigation or water to run to waste down the gutter or sidewalks where you're irrigating, your spray may be over spraying and hitting the sidewalks or streets. That would be considered water waste. Washing hard surfaces such as driveways or sidewalks, except for health and safety concerns. And along that same line is power washing of sidewalks or other hard surfaces. Power washing is allowed if it's prepping for a paint job, or allowed because it is needed for cleaning up seagull remnants or something that would create a safety hazard or health hazard. Our rule has been in place. Irrigation is only allowed before 9 o'clock or after 5 o'clock, 2 days a week. Those days are Wednesdays and Saturdays. And there are some nuances to this. It's in our rule, and we will be providing more information to the public as part of our outreach in stage 2 as to what can be done and can't be done. Hand watering or car washing without a quick acting shut-off nozzle is also another requirement. Next. And then the discussion I had today with the hospitality industry, serving drinking water to any customer unless they actually request water is prohibited. Irrigating during rain or within 48 hours of measurable rainfall is prohibited. And fortunately for us here on the peninsula, any transfer of ownership and permits that we issue require the installation of rain sensors on your irrigation systems. And those rain sensors would shut down the irrigation system for that 48 hours after we have measurable precipitation. Hotels are required to have a towel and linen reuse program. And so we provide cards to the hotels and the restaurants that help them to implement these types of programs. And so we are coordinating with hospitality on that. If a non-residential use is not compliant with all of our water efficiency requirements, that would be considered water waste. And then finally, charity car washes are prohibited. Next. So enforcement, I mentioned previously, we give people a warning, give them an opportunity to fix or correct the problem. However, there are fines for the second and subsequent offenses. They start at $100 and then go to $250 and $500. Large users receive a triple fine. And then there are additional actions if needed, such as putting in flow restrictors or taking legal action to try to abate the nuisance. Next. So for the public, this is always helpful, is if you see water waste, what do you do? Call the district office at 658-5601. We will respond to that complaint. Our office is open, of course, during normal business hours, but we do check our messages every day. You can always report to the district website at mpwmd.net. And then the photo on the right is the landing page for our website. There is a red button at the top shown by that arrow. If you click on that, you can report water waste. It actually comes through our office and will be seen probably much more frequently than our normal business hours, because I actually check email from time to time during the evening and early mornings and whatnot. And if something comes through, I'll take action on that and let CalAm know if it's something that needs their attention. And then finally on the state website at savewater.ca.gov, they have a water waste reporting option there as well. Next. So stage 2 water conservation is essentially just a call to action to reduce water use. And what it means for us is that we would move into an expanded outreach program and increase water waste enforcement. So our plan would be to go into a joint program with California American Water that would include such things as doing a targeted outreach program. I've mentioned hospitality, but in looking at some of these areas that may have this ornamental turf that could be subject to that ban on irrigation, the cities, the schools, churches have areas that may be affected by that ban, and they need to be contacted about that and informed about what the rules are. We would also be identifying the non-functional turf, and obviously that project has already started, or I wouldn't know. Cities, schools, and churches tend to be some of those people that need attention. Doing an advertising media campaign, including radio, television, and print. We have had tremendous success with our workshops on outdoor water efficiency primarily. And we plan to bring a few of those back over the summer that have had over 100 to 200 people attending. So we can bring that back and have that available. Mulch Madness that the board approved last month is currently underway. It started actually, I believe, last night with the first email blast to CalAm's customers. And my text this morning was that they already had over 200 people who had responded interested in the program. So I think that's going to actually be a tremendous success, reducing the amount of evaporation out of the soil and saving water in the landscape. We have a program called Summer Splash that begins July 1st, which this will be our 3rd year of doing it, where it's primarily directed at the children who are on break during the summer, gives them an opportunity to learn about water conservation and efficiency. And then we have some nice prizes that if everybody completes all the work, then they are entered into a drawing for special conservation prizes. Next. So this evening, staff recommendation, the board should receive public comments and then adopt resolution 2020-15 using the regulatory trigger to move to stage 2 with an effective date of June 1st, 2022. And I think that concludes my presentation.
Karen, are you on the line and able to continue to chair the meeting?
If I am, I heard
Okay,
every
good.
word. Thank you for checking. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So if my internet connection, yes. So I have 1 or 2 questions, but let's see first if other directors, yes, Mary.
One of the things that I was thinking as you were doing your presentation, Stephanie, talking about the telephone number that will be promoted. I can't think of anything that's more frustrating to people when you feel like you're in an emergency situation and you leave a message. Is it possible, I don't know, Dave, if you would be able to arrange this, that we could have some sort of 24-hour or some sort of, at least over the weekend, full coverage on that telephone number? And you're muted as well, Dave.
Oh, Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that with our voice over internet
Okay,
protocol supplier. Right now, that number is forwarded to one of our employees' assigned cell phones. So chances are it could be a nuisance over a weekend or over a 24-hour period. So, but we have the ability to change where it's transferred to. So we'll look at that.
okay, thank you. And then I had another question. You were talking, it was described that you could only water twice a week and except with some nuances. Can you give an example of what those nuances are?
Absolutely. So we've had in place the 2-day-a-week watering for many years, and the days are Wednesday and Saturday before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. If you have irrigation that's overseen by a professional gardener or landscaper that's available on site, that would be exempted, but it is still restricted to only 2 days a week. So if you have a professional gardener, they can, as long as they're there, they can run your irrigation system as long as they don't do it more than twice a week. Yeah, and there are some other things, hand watering. You can water at any time with a little bucket or a can of water to take care of your plants, that kind of thing. Subsurface gray water irrigation systems can be operated at any time. And then obviously our golf courses, nurseries, and recreational spaces have a different, where they actually rely on water as part of their business plan. That is given special consideration. The one thing I do want to say, this really is applying to the Cal-Am system, and that will make it somewhat confusing, I think, just in general, but the irrigation, if you're irrigating with water from a well, you would not be restricted as long as the irrigation is done in an efficient manner. And we've actually had in our plan for some time that if you do irrigate with either well or recycled water, it would be really helpful to have some kind of a notification, a sign or something that people could see that says this, this is not potable water for irrigation. The fairgrounds is one of those places. They use a well for irrigation. It's obviously green and people see the irrigation. So we get notifications from time to time about that. And so, and I think that's really kind of important, is if there are alternative sources being used, it would be helpful if there was some notification.
And I think it's important too that, stage 2 is more outreach. So we've all seen, a homeowner with a hose in hand on, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, irrigating his or her own landscape. But during this stage, we're highly more likely to inform the homeowner or to follow up with a notification. So it's mostly just to heighten awareness and have people, act before they, or think before they act, I guess.
So will this stepped up enforcement require more resources? Or can we do that?
No. Well, so my plan right now is we have 2 inspectors that primarily have been focused on doing our permit finals and that kind of thing. During the pandemic, our focus was more on just trying to do the absolutely essential inspections. But the plan right now is to have them in the field more often and doing more enforcement on the commercial requirements that we started doing before we ended up in the shutdown mode. So we're going to get back out there with a primary focus on the hotels and restaurants, because that's where right now I think a lot of the education has kind of been forgotten as far as water service at the restaurants and some of those things. So we want to get back out, educate them, and then we're going to continue doing our systematic inspections of the commercial uses to make sure they comply with the best management practices.
But there will be a bigger time constraint on some of the field staff following up on if somebody clicks our button on the homepage and enters in a water waste complaint, typically what we try to do is go confirm that in fact it's real. And then somebody has to sit down and do a letter, you know, a one-time warning letter, or a fix-it ticket, if you will. So yeah, it'll shift the duties of some of our people.
Thank you. Mayor Roberson.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie, thanks for the very clear report. So what we're dealing with is a statewide mandate, correct? And meanwhile, as you were going over the various measures, it struck me, unless I misinterpreted it, that our water district area is already doing all of that.
Yes, exactly. So there will be a minimal impact on the customers in CalAm because we have done so much already, and we always have this ordinance in place. We always have this water waste situation. The big change is this ornamental landscaping, and then just committing to do some additional outreach and enforcement on the water waste.
Yes, and as you pointed out, hospitality, I've noticed a little bit of slacking off at restaurants. They're also using plastic straws again, but you got to pick your battles. But my thought is, this is in my side of the business, we're constantly getting state mandates that go across the state without an understanding that every area is different. I don't know if this went through, if they understand in Sacramento that Santa Cruz and Monterey are probably role models of water conservation already. Then you look at Southern California, where 30 million people are served by the Metropolitan Water District, and their use went up 25% in March. And so is, other than, Mary already heard this today, other than driving me crazy, secondly, is there an understanding of the differentiation of different areas, or is one size fits all, which is my experience, what the state does all the time?
No, actually, there's definitely recognition that there are some, as the state water board said, quote, super savers out there.
Good.
Including Santa Cruz. And although the water district didn't weigh in on this, we would fall into that same category.
Nice.
The final language from the adopted order is not out, and the regulation's not out at this point. It has to go through the legal review, but there may have been an exemption in there that basically would identify our area as one of those areas that could be exempt from it. But because of such minimal impact that this change to stage 2 does, I mean, I really think the message is support what's going on in the state. When, you know, it doesn't hurt us to remind everybody that we all are in this together and we need to save water.
Yes, and anecdotally, as I witness a lawn, what is that from an individual viewpoint? And so we even we're having the Memorial Day concert at Colton Hall, and you can take a look at our grass. We're cutting water. Well, one of the things is because utilities are expensive. So anything that we can do to let the state know, hey, we're doing our part, and go after the miscreants and leave us alone, that would be very, very helpful, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Riley.
Yeah, a quick question. Where do cemeteries fall in the functional, non-functional turf?
Whoa, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, actually, but I will say that the city cemetery is irrigated with water from Lake El Estero. So that is okay. The Catholic cemetery, I believe, is on CalAm, and that was not addressed in the hearing. Cemeteries were not talked about, so I will have to get better direction.
Stephanie, the Pacific Grove Cemetery is also irrigated with reclaimed water.
Correct. And I believe Seaside Cemetery is on a well.
And golf courses?
So there's only one golf course that remains on potable supply, and that's Old Del Monte. Everyone else is on either well water or recycled water. So exempted.
Through the chair,
Please.
Stephanie, Seaside Municipal is in the district, so they on stage 2 too, right? So when I go down there and talk to them and tell them that they on stage 2 too, they won't be jumping down my throat.
Yeah, the definition of an urban water provider for this purpose has a number of connections threshold, which I believe is 3,000. So they would be potentially exempt. They've done their best to try to mimic the rate tariffs of Cal-Am so that everything looks kind of the same. But I think they would actually have an exemption in this case.
Okay, the reason I want to know, because if people call in after they hear this,
Yeah.
and they go out there in the Seaside Municipal area, I hope our people are willing to explain to them that they're not under this, even though they should voluntarily be up under it, but they're exempt. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Director Supervisor Adams.
Thank you. Stephanie, since we're going to be going through this, have you considered doing another push for things like the shower timer and some of the tchotchkes that people can really benefit from?
Absolutely. That's definitely something we're looking at. Like I said, we will be doing advertising and outreach. We've actually even talked about possibly bringing back our drought drive-through giveaway thing that we had back in 2015. So yeah, we'll be looking at several different things that we can do for outreach.
That's great. And then Alvin, a question for you. Is the Veterans Cemetery, how is the Veterans Cemetery irrigated?
That's over in Marina Coast area.
Okay, thank you.
Still, it would be good to know the answer to that. Are quick shut-off nozzles widely available?
Yes, both the district and Cal-Am offer them free.
And they're available in hardware stores? And
They're available, yes, definitely in the hardware stores, but we actually do give them out. So if somebody wanted to come by one of our offices, we would have those available.
when our offices are open, and that's.
No, we're open. We're open from 9 to 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and we have been since last July. And Cal-Am's offices are also open during those hours.
Mm-hmm. Good. Any other questions? We have before us a draft resolution that essentially expresses support for the State Water Resource Control Board proposed emergency regulations and adopting those measures for the district. So any questions or comments about that?
You need to go to the public, I think, as you know, Chair.
Yes.
All right, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 2, please raise your hand. You see one raised hand. Directors, are you able to see my screen share here of the timer?
Yes.
All right, and at this time, I would like to invite Patrick. Patrick, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Unmute. So hopefully I'm coming through. I don't see how to turn on my camera. But good evening. I am Patrick Pilz with California American Water, and I manage our conservation programs around the state. We wanted to express support for moving the Monterey Peninsula to stage 2 of our shared water shortage contingency plan. We have activated water shortage rules in response to drought conditions in other parts of the state where we serve. And we're also in the process of doing so in our other Monterey County water systems. So given our water supply challenges here on the peninsula, it makes sense that we take prudent action. I want to thank all of our customers. They are, like it was said, they are already among the most efficient water users in the state. So I think really our message is to keep up the good work. And with Stephanie, we look forward to continuing our partnership with Mpwmd staff to promote water efficiency, water conservation, best practices and, providing the rebates and the programs that we do together to help our customers. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for that and for your work together with the district on these conservation programs.
Chair Paul, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Okay. Any comments now on the resolution? If not, is there a motion to adopt it?
Chair Paul, we have Director
Oh.
Riley.
No, I move approval, but I have a curiosity question before the decision.
Please go ahead.
Dave, you in your report or in the report, there was a reference to Cal-Am making its report on its supply and demand features to the PUC. I'm just curious about when Cal-Am makes a report like that, are they reporting the demand numbers that they feel are the appropriate ones? Or are they reporting both numbers that seem to exist between the district and Cal-Am?
No, it'll be their numbers, and this particular report is to go to the State Water Board.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah. And it's a little unclear exactly what's going to be reported, even though the date is a week away. And Stephanie, I believe the discussion was to make the report, it will identify many of the urban water systems who don't have a problem. And so I think it's incumbent upon us locally to remind Cal-Am, and they know this, that the aquifer at the Carmel River is full and the Seaside Groundwater Basin has water in it and the right to pump is there. So I think it'll be a fairly favorable report if in fact they all do get submitted in a timely fashion, which, we just don't know. This is kind of breaking new territory.
Yeah, it was a curiosity question from my standpoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we had a motion to adopt the resolution and a second, did we not? Joel?
don't
Yeah,
believe
so
you
the
had a
motion-
second.
The motion, I just heard a motion by Director Riley.
And then I think, okay, roll call vote, please.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Mallett.
Yeah.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes,
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
and thank you very much, Stephanie and our GM and anyone else who worked on this project. Appreciate it, and all the related work that you're doing, the conservation projects. Okay, and now for the long-awaited budget.
Madam Chair, you have one item before that. Item 3, report of the action taken on closed session on May 16th.
My apologies.
So
That's important. Please, go ahead.
thank you and good evening. Taking us back to May 16th, we had 5 items on the closed session, 4 of which were considered at the 5 p.m. closed session, but we were not able to fully complete the discussion of one item, CS2, which is the conference with real property negotiators concerning acquisition of Cal-Am's facilities in accord with Measure J. The minutes in tonight's packet on page 10 indicate the 2 other items were to be discussed after the open session, but that's not accurate. There was an opportunity for questions on items CS3 and CS4B, but there were no questions and therefore there was no discussion. So the only item discussed after the end of the open session on the 16th was items CS2, the real property discussion. On that matter, there was an oral status report provided to the board by your general manager and myself, and there was board discussion of options, but there was no direction that was reportable. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about that?
Well, I just want to add to that Joelle will be contacting each of the directors to schedule a follow-up closed session on the same topic in early July.
Yes, it's already sent out a Google poll to try and get that scheduled. Thank you. Other comments, questions? All right, thank you, Dave Laredo. And now let's move on to our budget.
And I will let Suresh provide a presentation. Joelle, I think you're going to run that presentation for him. And I just want to remind everybody that the Golden State Warriors didn't get it done like they were supposed to at the last game. So they're currently playing now. So we'll do our best to get through this, to leave a little time left over.
Okay. Over to you.
Thank you, General Manager Dave. Joel, would you please bring up the slides? Thank you. Good evening, directors. This is the annual budget process where we go through the budget in a workshop manner, and then we will be bringing this budget back with your comments and suggestions that we'll incorporate into the budget and bring it to you on June 20th for actual action, which is going to be the adoption of the budget. So this is just a review session today, and we'll go the entire budget. The budget was included in the board packet. Also, there was a draft resolution in there as well, and I'll kind of like preface as to what was included in that entire budget packet. Next slide, please, Joel.
Suresh, do you want to take questions as we go, or how do you want to do it?
Absolutely, we can jump into questions as well, or if the board desires, we can do it after the entire slideshow. I'll leave that up to the chair.
Okay.
So the table of contents, we have the draft resolution in the budget itself, and that starts on page 1. The transmittal letter, which basically captures pretty much the budget in a summary format. It's on pages 3 through 5. We have the mission and vision on one page. Then the expenditures we have from pages 7 to 11. There's different forms of expenditures in there, basically different setups. We have the division expenses. We have the cost center expenses. We have the comparison expenses, meaning we have 3-year comparisons to past years, and then the proposed budget. So all of that is captured in separate slides or separate piece of the budget. There's also the expenditure charts in there as well. Then from pages 12 through 15 are the project expenses. That's the big heavy hit area. That's where most of the big ticket items are, if it's related to a project. And so those are on pages 12 through 15. We also have the 3-year CIP program. This is basically for the current proposed fiscal year. We have the numbers there. And then the next 2 years, we basically have some placeholders in there just to show what might come down the line. We also have the capital asset purchase. That's on page 17. Sometimes we refer them as fixed asset as well. And so those are like vehicles, computer equipment, building updates, upgrades, things like that. We have the capital asset replacement schedule on page 18. This captures all of our fixed assets, all of our buildings, anything that the district owns, a big ticket item. We basically show what's on that list, and we also show how we are accruing money for that. So that's on page 18. Next slide, please. The revenues are pages 19 through 21. Again, similar to the expenses, we have the cost center revenues, we have the revenue comparisons, and then we have the revenue chart as well. The reimbursement page on 22 is basically all of the reimbursements that we get from our agencies that we work with, California American Company, any grants, any other agencies. It's all listed on that page. Reserve analysis, we have what shows where we're going to projected end of the fiscal year from June 22, and then also shows how we're going to be either banking or using the reserves, and where the projected number is going to be when we do the budget and we come to closure on June 30th, 23. The org chart on page 25, and then the division budget, basically this lists all the individual divisions and just shows it in a 3-year comparison mode, what the expenses have been division-wide, and also some chart to show that, just to show that things are still in place, that nothing's kind of like skewed. The budget calendar on page 36, basically, it'll show how we've arrived to today. And then the glossary on pages 37 through 39. And so that's kind of like, we try and capture all the terminologies in there. If we are missing any, do let us know. We'll try and put that in there. But we think we've captured pretty much all. But sometimes we do find that we miss something in there. Next slide, please. So this is the budget calendar, and this is also listed as a separate page on the actual budget itself. We did send the request to divisions, supervisors, managers on April 24th. We got the feedback back on May 9th. We put the budget together. Team management did a review on May 12th. We needed to do a follow-up again just to do some fine-tuning to the budget. So we met again on May 16th. We did make some adjustments through that process, which brings us to tonight, which is the budget workshop. We'll go over that here tonight, and then we'll get it back in front of the board again on June 20th for budget adoption. Joel, next slide. So the board adopted strategy. This was adopted back in 2005, and there are three prongs to that. One of them was you always want to make sure develop annual balanced budget, and we always try and do that. To preserve existing services and to enable the district to carry out our mission and board's vision. So we always try and see what all fits in the budget, what needs to be done based on that prong. And then also it was to maintain a 5% general operating reserve and then replenish it to 50% over 5 years. We've done that. Some years we've missed it, but not by a lot. Just happy to report that this year our reserve balance, general fund reserve balance, will stand at 53%. So as you can see, that also makes it for this year. There are some years that we've missed it, and that's because we've got some heavy projects, say Mpwmd project or ASR project where we had to spend a lot of money. So some years did miss, but this year we are going to be 53%. Next slide, please.
Suresh, I'd like to just pause there for a question. What does it mean to replenish to 50%?
To make sure that our general fund balance is 50% of our operating expenses. So our reserve fund balance needs to be on the books, needs to be more than 50% of the operating expenses.
For a year?
At that snapshot, at that given time when we are doing the budget.
Yeah, okay.
And so in some years, when our expenses are super high because of projects, it becomes a little difficult to do so. In other years, as we rebound back to just the minimal operating costs, it becomes easier to do. So it is, because it's a snapshot in time, it's not always super easy to build it up and maintain it.
It's 50% of what?
Of the operating expenses.
So take for example,
For 1 year period.
Yeah, what would that be to, this year? Our operating expenses are roughly what?
I believe it's 18, roughly about 18 or $19 million.
Yeah.
And simply the only reason why it's gone up now is because of the Mpwmd project that is treated as a operating revenue and operating expenses. Shall I continue?
Yes, please. I suggest we pause where it makes sense just to see if there are any questions, for example, on expenditures, revenues, this question of the operating reserves. So let's.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to ask questions along the way. I think the PowerPoint I recall is, at least 20 pages. So it might be,
Okay, so directors, feel free to jump in when you have questions.
Yeah, and I guess we can also use the raise hand function, and Joel probably will be able to see that as well. So either way, we'll definitely address those.
That's correct. I could see the raised hands.
So for fiscal year 22-23, and not just this fiscal year, but every year as we do the budget, we are very mindful of what's going on around economically and how it's going to impact our funding sources, if there are going to be any impact. So we always are monitoring that. The original division request, as I had mentioned, did come through. We met together through the team management budget session. This year, we had to do two. For most years, we do have to do two, where we kind of like do a first pass, and then we come around and do a second pass just to fine tune it, make sure that everything makes sense and it all stays in balance. The format of the budget itself, it's presented in the same format as previous year, so we didn't do any surprise change layouts or anything. And then the continuing COVID-19 impact that has been evaluated and included in the budget. So on the revenue side, even though we don't have any impacts on our user fee, property tax collections, and our water supply charge, but on the expense side, things have gone up. Things are getting expensive. So not a whole lot, but you know, the purchases that we do, we've seen some increases in prices and stuff. So those all have been taken into account. For example, the biggest shock we got this year was insurance. It went up about 15 to 20%. So things like that, things have been creeping up. So we took that COVID-19 impact into account as well when we did this budget. Next slide, please. Our effort always has been to balance the budget since 2004 when the board adopted the three-pronged strategy. Most of the last few years, we were not able to balance the budget due to the PWM project and also the ASR projects as well. We also are using the reserve funds this year, but it's not a reserve. It's basically carryover reserve. So let me just explain a little bit on what carryover reserve is. So we've budgeted for items last fiscal year in 21-22. And let's say we don't complete the project, but it's already budgeted for. But what happens at the end of the year when we close out our books on June 30th, 22, all those projects that have not been completed, those numbers get rolled over into our general reserve fund. And so we call them a carryover. So if it's project hasn't been completed, materialized, we've carried over that project. And so even though it sits in the reserve fund, we draw it out in the proposed fiscal year 22-23. So that is technically it's use of reserves, but it is the carryover project. So that's where the use of reserves comes in to balance the budget for this fiscal year. And you'll see the number is, I believe, $1.3 million or something, and we'll go over that when I start showing the numbers. And as I mentioned, the general reserve balance, which stands at $14.1 million, and that's 53% of the operating budget. So the total proposed budget for 22-23, the total number is $32.6 million. This is about 20% higher than the 21-22 budget, but mostly it's on the project side. You'll see the changes as we go into the actual categories of the expenses. It's on later slides. This budget doesn't anticipate a full year of user fee revenues. And that's based on estimated CalAm collection of water revenues. So what we do is we track them, and we've been tracking it for the last 4 full years now. So we know what the historical numbers are and how the trend has been going. So we've been pretty good with that, but sometimes we do have to come and make some adjustments during the media process. So we'll continue to monitor the collection. And if there are any adjustments that's necessary, we will definitely do that through the media budget process. This budget also includes a full year of water supply charge. We have not made any adjustments to that through the media process. We do monitor those, but the revenue stream for water supply charge is fairly consistent. We have not had to do any adjustments on that. So we feel it's the same for this year as well. Whatever we budget, we feel the collection is going to be very close to the budget number. A full year of property tax revenue, we'll monitor that as well. There have been changes for that some years, so we'll continue to monitor collections and see where it leads us to. And that is tied, the property tax revenues are tied to the property values as well. So it does go up depending on where the market dictates for that. This budget does include the full year of pure water Monterey water sales numbers. It's $12.2 million that we are going to be collecting on the revenue side, and the same offset, $12.2 million, is going to be on the expense side. So we'll monitor and make adjustments for all of the revenue lines. If any of them are over budgeted or under budgeted, we'll definitely bring them during the mid-year budget process.
Director Anderson, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'm curious, but this is gonna mean that I haven't paid enough attention to my bill, but have the rates changed on the CalAm bills because of the Pure Water Monterey water costs?
Yes, it happens annually, and it's based on a total budget for the project and an estimated number of acre feet. And so in June of every year, CalAm files what's called an advice letter. And then typically 30 days later, that surcharge, that purchase water surcharge, is added to the CalAm bill. So then it remains intact for the remainder of the year. So you'll be seeing a new purchase water surcharge probably on or about July 1st.
And this will be the first year that we'll have 3,500 acre feet all year. Is that right?
The year that we're just about to finish, June 30th, will have 3,500 acre feet. So the estimated price of water was based on that full contract amount.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, Joelle. We are going to continue outsourcing the following services: information technology and GIS. We have successfully done that for the last 3.5, 4 years. For GIS, I believe, yeah, it's about the same for both of them. So 3.5, 4 years, and it seems to work well. So we'll continue doing the outsourcing of that, and there's some savings for that, roughly about $200,000 a year. Next slide, please. So these are some of the large budgeted expenses that are included, and this is actually included in the project expenses sheet that's included in the draft budget. ASR, there's some site work there. That bill is going to be about $325,000 for this fiscal year. The operation of ASR phase 1, that's going to be $792,000, but that's fully reimbursed by California American Water ratepayers. So that's a revenue neutral for the district, comes in and goes out. Local water projects, this is a carryover line for last fiscal year. When I say last fiscal year, it's 21-22 that we are just about to complete. $157,000. There's some work to be done at the Los Padres Dam study report, and that's about $84,000. The Pure Water Monterey and the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project modeling, about $98,000 of some work there. Some minor numbers, budget numbers for CalAm diesel. I think we just carrying that as a placeholder.
So we are actually having done expenses for that at this time.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Continuing on the large budgeted expenses for the Pure Water Monterey project related expenses, the operating reserve, this is the water that we have to bank as per the water purchase agreement. And so we're going to have to buy and store the water in the ground, and that's going to be about $1.2 million for this fiscal year. The water purchase, as I had mentioned on the revenue side, $12.2 million. Here's the water purchase on the cost side, $12.2 million. And then some expansion cost. This is the Pure Water Monterey expansion related project. The ticket for that is about $1 million for this fiscal year. So
Can we just stop there for a second? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Suresh, just to remind all of us and the public what those expenses are for the expansion that the district is investing in that.
Oh, just the third bullet. Yeah. So we are participating as the 75% contributor of pre-construction costs. So it's expected that the actual cost of the project will be funded through a federal loan called the WIFIA program. But getting to that point, there is 90% design, bid documents, and environmental and permitting work that still needs to get complete. And so that $1 million represents our estimate of about 75% based on budget numbers that we saw from Monterey One Water.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, could move on.
More project on the on the large expenses budget. So there's a placeholder for near-term production capacity, $1.7 million. Some measured Monterey Water System Measure J work, 150,000. That number is incorrect. That is a
I think it
typo.
was, I think it was supposed to be 500,000.
500,000, correct. Correct. It
Which,
doesn't change the budget. The budget does have $500,000. This is my PowerPoint slide that I just transposed the numbers. So the Monterey Water System Measure J work is going to be $500,000 for this year. Updated seaside modeling, 75,000. Water allocation process, 75,000. And I'll pause there. I guess we'll talk more.
let's pause right there. I want to talk about that first item. This is a placeholder for a concept that we've started discussions with both the city of Seaside and California American Water on. And you've heard the discussion about the use of ASR well number 1 as a production well or extraction well. And one of the things we're eyeballing is a near-term replacement well. But the project would come to you as a board at whatever point it's a little more fully formed. But we did put money in there for that purpose. That's at 1.75 million, first bullet point.
Go to the next slide.
Question before we leave that, please.
Please, go ahead.
Dave, is this a fully owned production well that the district owns?
Well, so that's a lot of the discussion being had. There's need by the city of Seaside to potentially replace their well number 4. There's need by us in conjunction with Cal-Am to increase production capacity, at least for the next 3 years. And so it could be the type of thing that we cost share and then turn over ownership eventually. But it's so early stage that I couldn't really tell you.
Okay, well, just thanks for explaining it a little more, because I didn't quite understand the production capacity. Was it the district's production capacity? Was it a shared production capacity? That's thank you. Okay.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, we fully embrace our position on ASR well number 1 and the need to limit it as a production well, because we want to ensure the long-term success of Pure Water Monterey.
Mhm.
But we also feel the need for the community to have access to water. And while we're looking at ASR well number 4, as well as connecting the Cal-Am Peralta well to the Monterey pipeline, this might be something else that could fill an interim or near-term need. And who ultimately is going to be on the hook for cost sharing and ownership is unknown. There's some land available, but it's Seaside's land near the reservoir up above the four-door golf courses. So just, as I said, we'll come back to the board once we've got a fully baked plan, if any.
And the parties again are the district, Cal-Am, City of Seaside.
Correct. And even to some extent, Marina Coast Water District, if there's a long-term need to do a water exchange so that the city of Seaside can direct some of its water to the Campus Town project. And so there's several needs in that area, and their long-term is different than short-term. And, because ultimately the Pure Water Monterey expansion has 4 extraction wells in it, but it's kind of like, how do you get from here to there and still get the full dose of Pure Water Monterey injected water? And so we've got a near-term need we'd like to help solve. Marina Coast and Seaside have a longer-term need they'd like to solve.
And this is a placeholder allocation anyway, or appropriation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, could you go back to that last slide, please? Okay, Monterey Water System Measure J work, 150,000.
No,
Uh,
500,000.
It is, that's not all that you need that you put up on that chart that you showed us about what work else need to be done.
Yeah,
on
that's
that list.
Yeah, you're correct, Director Edwards. It's and Suresh pointed out that it's a typo only in this presentation, that it's correct in the budget in your staff note. And so I think the number that we showed you in the pyramid chart added up to about 440,000 or 450,000. And the actual placeholder in the proposed budget is 500,000. So this was
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I would like to see that corrected. That's a better number because I want to.
And it's done.
Corrected.
Well, because I want to show the public that
Yep.
this is work that we're gonna have to vote on and it have to be done, but it's in the budget. You know, when I seen that, what I heard earlier, I was worried about it. But if I see that number in there, I might can continue on. But thank you for making that correction.
So this is on this page, we have the day-to-day program-related activities, the fish rearing facility and related fish rescue activities. In the budget itself, it's 387,500. The riparian and other erosion control activities, 48,500, and hydrologic monitoring, it's 224,100. On the project expenses budget itself, you'll see a listing of all of the items that makes up these amounts. So we have the items listed, then we have a subtotal for all of these activities, and that's how you'll be able to track it to those to see what exactly is involved in each of those. But this is the day-to-day program-related activities. We also have the design and construction, and it's not water intake system. It's the rearing channel work. It's $750,000 in the budget. We have grant-funded IRWM project round 1 and also round 2. It's $3.4 million, and that's reimbursed. We have the conservation-related activities, $402,000, and then we have the conservation rebates for $400,000, and that's again reimbursed by California American Ratepayers. So, any questions on any of those?
What is IRW?
Yeah.
Integrated regional.
Yep. Integrated regional water management. And so integrated regional water management program was established across the entire state, where geographic regions are lumped together as regional planning groups. And in this particular case, we act as the program lead. Most recently, we did not have a project of the districts, but we had projects for Marina Coast Water District, City of Seaside, I think, stormwater, City of Monterey, rather, stormwater, and so forth. So we act as the local Monterey Bay coordinator for this. And every time there's a water bond at the state, so like Proposition 50, Proposition 80 something, which I've now forgotten, and then most recently Proposition 1 about 5 years ago, always allocates a chunk of its big capital raise to the regional program. And so each region either competes for the money, or in our case, we managed to get all of the regional participants to sign an agreement to proportionally share in the proceeds. So we go through these cycles where the projects are prioritized and ranked, and then successful projects are funded. And so we receive the money from the state and distribute the money to the local agencies, and occasionally ourselves. We've had projects of our own. But yeah, that's what that program is.
Thank you.
Director Riley?
I just want to add that this is one of the wonderful things I think that the district does, and does very well. And it puts us in a kind of a steering position, leadership position for the process. as well as the criteria that gets it discussed with across a broad network of interests. And I'm just really pleased that that the district has gotten this position, this project. Anyway, I'm just very pleased that the district does this. I just want to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually to follow up on that, there is a push right now to kind of shift the IRWM planning group's focus to climate resiliency. And so it's unclear whether the district's going to want to stay in that lead position because the project overlap may not be everything that we think it is. So, you know, when the funding sources change and the type of projects change, we will need to look at our role in this again. But it's something that we've actually been proud of to coordinate. And, you know, there's a certain satisfaction in those particular cycles when the district doesn't have a project that got ranked or funded, and we just simply put it all together and then distributed the funds. So yeah, it's been a good role for us.
So we are comparing the expenditure side to the previous year's budget. So here we are doing 22-23 budget to 21-22 budget. Project cost went up by about 28%. Most of those costs are related to a new addition of the project, $1.8 million. The water supply, Pure Water Monterey project cost also went up. The water purchase itself went from $9.7 million in fiscal year 21-22 to $12.2 million. So there's some changes there. So that all makes up.
And let's pause on that one because there was a significant increase in the price of Pure Water Monterey water, primarily related to chemical costs and energy costs, a result of supply chain issues and everything else you're seeing in the global economy.
We do not anticipate those going back down again, do we?
No, all we can anticipate is that they maybe level out a little bit. You know, CPI doesn't go up 11%. Instead, it goes up 3 or something. But and the other thing that we will be doing in concert with Monterey One Water is that $19 million federal grant will be applied over several years to help reduce the expenses that show up in the cost of water. So we'll be managing the price of water that we pay as well as what the CalAm customers pay. You know, that surcharge that Director Anderson asked about earlier, using some federal grant dollars, as well as a little piece of those federal grant monies coming directly back to the district for expenditures we've made on the project.
Thank you.
Personnel cost at $4.4 million. This is about 11% over prior year. And again, here we are proposing to add 3 new positions. 2 will go augment GMO's office. One of them is a financial analyst type of position. The other one is a outreach position. Although the offset for the outreach position would be hiring an in-house person, and then the offset is the consulting cost that goes down. So it's kind of like sort of not totally neutral, but it doesn't increase that much. And then we also have a admin support position in the water demand division. So it's adding 3 new positions for the personal side, which adds up to 11%. Service and supplies, 6%, just normal increase in services. The biggest one there was the insurance cost, where our carrier, SDRMA, informed us that this year's insurance liability program will be 15 to 20%. And that's just kind of like a trend. Every agency you talk to these days, they all are getting about a 15, 20% increase in insurance costs. Legal expenses, we are keeping that flat as last fiscal year. We also show a separate chart for that to the administrative committee, and we've kind of like held off within that $400,000. So we feel that that's going to stay there.
Question, please. When the federal grant,
Director Malik, yes.
when we receive the federal grant of $19 million, what is it going to offset from this budget?
Yeah, so it will only be 1.5 million offsetting district direct costs. The remainder will be used to, there's a debt service reserve fund requirement. So, and that was funded through sewer monies. And so that'll get replaced with the federal monies. And then each year there's an operating expense for the project itself for both renewal and replacement monies, or depreciation, if you will, and the principal payment of the loan itself. And so the majority of the money will stay in the Pure Water Monterey project to offset those expenses to keep the purchase price of water down. And so what you would see then in the water costs that Suresh mentioned earlier, the 12 million, there is some impact of that 19 million, but it's really going to be spread over about 4 to 5 years going forward.
So this is not a lump sum amount that the district gets?
Correct. And as I said, almost all of it goes to the project. Our direct reimbursement's only going to be 1.5 million, which will show up in this budget year. The rest of it's nestled in the price of the water from the project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very, very welcome. that,
Yeah.
Through the chair, to the GM, and how soon can we get those personnel on that you need, the financial and the PR? Is that going to be at mid-year? Is that going to be a mid-year deduction and then come back and ask for it?
Yeah, I think we're going to try to address the public outreach person first. And the administrative position for water demand is actually swapping out a temporary employee that we've hired through a service to make it a permanent district employee. So there's some offsetting savings there as well. Those will be the first two. And then we've got we may have a replacement hire that we have to do. And we'll be onboarding a new hire, also a replacement position next month that's not reflected in this personnel costs. But yeah, I don't think the proposed utility analyst or financial analyst would be done until best case October, November.
Okay, thank you.
And that person will work directly, will report to you directly, Dave?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, it's probably not necessary for purposes of our budget, but I'd be interested to know the scope of that person's work, you know, and why that analyst is going to be working with you and reporting to you as opposed to the administrative services. But if this is not a good time to answer that, it can wait.
Yeah,
No, and it could be that it may end up being assigned to administrative services, but we have to develop a job description for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, add to that, all of the new proposed positions, the actual job descriptions and the authorization to add them to our org chart and hire them will come to the board with full detail discussion at that point.
Good, sounds good. Thank you.
Contingency, this is kind of like if we've missed anything on the supply and services side, small things, that $70,000 contingency, sort of like a placeholder. We've been doing that pretty much relatively flat, 70,000 each year. Debt service payment for Mechanics Bank loan for this fiscal year is 230,000. That's built in this budget. Fixed asset purchase, we'll discuss that in detail, but that price tag is at 450,000. And then, of course, the election expense, we are budgeting at 250,000, but the range of expenditure could be between 250,000 to 330,000. When we come to the board for the actual election expense, we will get the authorization for 330. But our historical experience with the election office has been that it's always, whenever they give us the range, it's always on the lower end. So that's the number we are budgeting for. And if that number does go up, we don't have to pay this election bill until April 2023 for the November 2022 election. So we will know more as it gets closer to that when we do our mid-year budget adjustment. So if there's any adjustments up or down, we'll definitely make that adjustment. We feel that 250 is a good number.
Oh, you do?
Um,
You do. I feel that the higher number, 330, whatever you said, should be that number, and the 250, it'd be the best, love to see it. But I go with that, the higher number, because the 330 is what you projected, but the 250, we don't know, and I like to be down to the penny.
Yeah, they've always done that to us, the election office, by the time, because they do have to take into account the variable and the fixed cost, and they give us that range. But over the last 10 years, every election cost, it's always been the same.
Okay.
Meaning the range of the number, it's always on the low end.
Director Riley, you have a question?
Yeah, the question about the Mechanics Bank loan, is this a payment down on principal? I mean, a payment against principal? This is not the interest payments.
No, it's both combined. So 100,000 is the principal and 130,000 is the interest. And then we are also setting aside, you'll see later on in the slides, additional $500,000 towards the prepayment of the loan.
Okay, I did see the later numbers too, and that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the P&I. So general reserve, when we balance the budget, and again, we categorize the carryover line item as not really a use of reserve per se, because it's a carryover of the numbers. But when we balance the budget, the $260,000 basically is a general reserve that we, when we do the calculation, that's what comes out to be the general reserve that's going to be banked for this fiscal year. We are setting aside money for the pension reserve again this fiscal year and OPEB. We've been doing that for the last 4 years. This is going to be the 5th year. So those numbers are adding up about 500,000 for the pension, and OPEB is going to have 500,000 as well. We'll definitely be coming probably this year to the board to say how we want to use on the pension side. We've got some ideas that we'll share with the board at that time, a separate action item. But we've been kind of like did the seed money, and we've been continuing to do that 100,000 each year, and it seems to work fine. Capital reserve, this includes the renewal and replacement for district facilities, vehicles, building stuff, ASR facility, Sleepy Hollow facility, all of those, we basically accrue money each fiscal year. And so this year's accrual is going to be $408,000, and we have a separate sheet that's attached in the budget itself that shows how we arrived at $408,000. There's a calculation for that. And then the Mechanics Bank prepayment reserve that Director Riley was just talking about. So this is where the $500,000 is setting aside. Again, this is just setting aside. We'll bring it to the board again and ask the board's permission to go ahead and pay it down as a prepayment towards the Mechanics Bank. We did make one prepayment last fiscal year of $500,000. So we're banking this again, and we'll be coming in after August or September. Once the budget is adopted in June, then we'll do a separate action item to the board.
No, it will still leave us with a balloon payment requirement towards the end of next fiscal year, on the order of about $2 million. So it's not as if we've completely prepaid it.
But when can you talk about refinancing it? Do we have to wait till the end, or can we start early?
Well, our intent is to start early. We were much more excited about possibly refinancing it before the recent interest rate hikes. So right now it's not really in the money to refinance. So I think, we're playing a little bit of game with interest rate risk. And we haven't had a conversation with Mechanics Bank. They took over, they acquired Rabobank's interests here locally. And we haven't had any discussion about their own interest in refinancing. And we will need to do that during this next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Yes, Director Malik.
How much is owed to what used to be Rabobank and now it's Mechanics Bank?
Yeah, I think right now 2.3 million, or it will be at the end of the fiscal year.
And we paid down some in the last budget year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we budget 500 each year to pay it down?
Yes,
This is the
Suresh,
second year.
last year, the first year, so it's only been $1 million.
Well, yeah, it was 500,000 we budgeted and then we paid that. So the rubber bank reserve balance sits at 0 now. And now we're going to be banking again $500,000 in.
Right. So the original loan was 4 million. And the annual principal and interest, if you go back one slide, as Suresh mentioned in the, I guess it's one more slide, in the debt service payment, annually there's only about $130,000 of principal being paid. And so, we're coming up on the 10th year of paying, but that only got it down to about, 3 million. And so then the remaining two payments that the $500,000 that we did last year and the $500,000 that we're proposing to do this year, that's what's going to get it down to around 2 million. But that is still a balloon payment coming up at the end of the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Roberson.
Yes, a couple questions about the pension reserve. Could you, I'm sure Mary would identify with this, where we have PERS liabilities, classic retirement, and PEPRA. Can you just share with us what kind of pension liability the district's looking at? How many classic employees we have versus PEPRA employees?
I don't have the exact demographic of the employees itself, but the total pension liability stands at about and there's a slide on that towards the end. I believe it stands at $6.5 million on the pension side. And then OPEB stands at about $5.1 million. But all the numbers are on one of our latest slides here.
And most of it is the classic. We're still heavily weighted towards classic employees. The post-PEPRA newer employees, there's very little liability whatsoever assigned to them. And I think we did those reports as part of the board packet. We do them annually. I'll dig them up and we'll make them available to the board just as a reminder.
Yeah, I believe we did that in December as well.
Yeah.
That's good, because we're looking at our cities and counties are looking at 15 to 20 years to classic employees to clear, because PEPRA, which is the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, does reduce the pension payments. Also applies to STRS, by the way, State Teachers Retirement System. And so those are sustainable. The classic, which are much higher retirement benefits, have not been sustainable. So all of us throughout the state are just going through that process of transitioning from classic to PEPRA, and hopefully somewhere along the line, 10, 15, 20 years out, we'll be able to deal with, we'll be in good shape. But meanwhile, of course, we have these liabilities that we have to deal with. And it sounds like in comparison to other jurisdictions, the water district's pension liability is fairly low, honestly.
It is, but our number of retirees has been, as you would expect with passage of time, is going up. And so it's that OPEB reserve that I think is also something we have to watch.
Good. Thank you very much.
Director Edwards?
Yeah, thank you. The capital reserves, is that accumulation? Did we save anything last year to this year, or that 408.5 every year?
It's every year. We accumulate every year, and the reserve balance for capital reserve now stands at about $1.2 or $1.3 million.
Well, it'd be nice to see that number up on here so people know that.
There's a chart for that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide. So this is the fixed asset purchase that I had talked about, 450,000 earlier. Most of it is carryover because of logistical issues. We have not been able to get them in time, but projects are underway. They're going through, but we'll definitely we'll have to carry it over into fiscal year 22-23. So computer upgrades, 133,000. We have 50,000 in there for a cell upgrade, or 52,000 that the board adopted, approved last month, I believe. We do have some sandbox upgrade. We do have some switches upgrade in that 133,000. We have the AV system upgrade that we continuing to carry forward that item because it's got a lot of moving parts in there, and we've just picked up that project again. And so we'll see if we're able to complete that project in 22-23. We have a backup generator. Again, it's a carry forward line item. We've started talking about conversation on that as well. The site security system, the board authorized that about 4 or 5 months ago. We're still having challenging issues on that in terms of getting the parts in, but most of the parts are in. I think they're going to be starting some cabling work next week or the week after. And the vehicle replacement, 2 are replacement for this fiscal year. One is for this, the fiscal year that we are in. The board approved that last month, I believe. But we're not going to be able to get the vehicle for 3-4 months for that one. And then come July 1, we'll come to the board again for the 2 about 20-year-old vehicle that needs to be replaced as well. So that's 142,000 in there. So that's the CI or fixed asset at 450. And Director Edward has.
Yes, on vehicle replacement, could you put 2 vehicles up there that we're going to replace so people can know that this is not just for one vehicle, 142,000? You know, to make it easy, well, we're replacing 2 vehicles or 3 or whatever that number is.
Yes, 142,000 is 3 vehicles.
Well, I think they would love to see that, and they probably think that's a good deal for us. They see that number up there. Thank you.
We'll definitely do that.
Yeah, let's see how fast Joel's hands are.
Put in parentheses 3, Joel. There you go.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Done. So all in all, this is the expenditure summary, the $32.6 million. As you can see, 22% of the budget itself is the project-related expenses. $12.2 million or 38% is the PWM water purchase cost. And then reimbursement projects, 4.7 or 15% of the budget. So a big chunk of the $32 million is project related. Personal cost, 4.4, it's only 14% of the budget. And then we have service and supplies and some of the other line items there, smaller line items. But majority of the 32% is either project, PWM water sales, or reimbursement projects. Joel, next slide. Now we turn our focus onto the revenue side. We are budgeting user fee at $5.5 million. This year's user fee, we had come through mid-year budget adjustment. We feel it's going to be about 5.3, but again, with the water rates and looking at the trend line, we feel 5.5 for next fiscal year. Water supply charge, relatively flat every year, 3.4, and it comes, whatever we budget, the actual comes right close to that. Property tax, 2.5, that's based on historical trend again. This year's number was 2.3, so that's going up by 200,000. PWM water sales, direct pass-through, but as I had mentioned, $9.7 million was for 21-22. $12.2 million is for 22-23. Capacity fee is basically just an estimate. We look at our crystal ball and say, okay, how many people are going to be pulling permits and drawing on and paying on the capacity fee? And that's, you know, we put a number there. Sometimes we're relatively close to that. Sometimes we are high, sometimes we are low, but we'll come back for mid-year budget adjustments when we see the 6-year trend line and see where that number leads to. And same thing with the permit fee. It's basically just, you know, basing it on an estimate and seeing how many people are going to be paying us for the permit fee for that year. Interest revenue is going down, and that's because for about 2 years, our rates have been going down. Now it's picking up again, but we are locked into some lower interest rate CDs, and LAIF doesn't just raise the rate overnight. It takes a long term for LAIF to get the rates up again. So we feel the 80,000 number. Last fiscal year was 130,000. So just to give you an idea, it's going down a little bit. Other revenues is just a placeholder for reimbursements. Sometimes we get insurance checks. Sometimes we get some other kind of checks, like people buying, paying for board CDs or paying for board packets, things like that. So small number there. So all in all, this is our district revenue, meaning we call them as operating revenues, and that's $24.3 million. Next slide, Joel. So this is looking at the reimbursement revenue now, and CalAm reimbursement stands at close to $1.2 million, and this is for the rebates. It's for the ASR reimbursement as well. There are 2 grants plugged in the budget, the IRWM round 1, round 2 grants. So that stands at $3.4 million on the revenue side. Other reimbursements are people paying for direct WDS permitting, water distribution system permitting. And so those are the reimbursement costs in there. Water master reimbursement, we do some work for the water master. We have an agreement with them, and so they reimburse us for all the costs that we spend. That's $39 million reclamation project. We do the billing for them, so there's some staff reimbursement that they do for that. So that's about $20,000. And then the legal recording reimbursement. This is the deed restriction line for customers. When we do that, they reimburse us for the recording and the legal fees. So that's about $36,000. And then here's the one we were all talking about, the Mpwmd Monterey reimbursement. This is that one-time $1.5 million reimbursement out of that $19 million that we'll get. So that reimbursement revenue brings it to 6.2.
I'm sure it took a lot of work to get that grant. Well done.
Director Anderson?
Yeah, I just have a quick question on the last one that I can't seem to remember this. What is the capacity fee? What exactly is that?
Right. So, and I don't know if Stephanie is still on, but basically when a project comes through and the project developer needs or gets a water release form from the city for additional water, based on.
I'll answer if you want.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, good.
Here. Yeah, the capacity fee is a fee charged when a permit applicant uses the jurisdiction's water allocation. So the last was the Peralta allocation. It's also charged for use of entitlement water for instance, the City of Pacific Grove's entitlement or Pebble Beach entitlement water. And it is a fee that was established in, I believe it was 1985, that is adjusted every July 1st. And it's just literally based on the water from certain water sources. If the permit completely offsets the new demand by different on-site credits, then there is no capacity fee.
Thank you.
So district revenues comparing over prior year is 13%, which is $24.3 million. Most of it is related to PWM water sales. And then some minor increases, or shouldn't say minor, but about $200,000-300,000 increases on the user fee. And then relatively about the same for the property tax. So all of those adds up to about 13% when you compare over prior year. Reimbursements, 114% over prior year. And most of that is related to $1.5 million coming in. And then also the grant project as well. There's a new grant there, $3.4 million. So last year, if you compare that, last year we only had about $1.3 million in grants. So those two adds up to that 114% increase. Carry forward from prior year, we are carrying forward, and this is what I was explaining, the $1.3 million projects that were budgeted for in 21-22, but are not going to get completed. So we are rolling that because the expenses are getting rolled out on the expense side, meaning they are reflected as new projects. The carry forward on the revenue side just shows that those impact to the budget is zero because we do the carry forward number. And then the capital reserve, basically we are buying the truck and then some of the other equipments that we are doing, they are coming out of the capital replacement reserve because that's what we were banking the money for. And so they were fully accrued now. So we're using that money to buy that equipment, and it's going to start accruing again once we buy the equipment. So that's 197,000. And then the debt reserve, basically setting aside the $500,000 for the Rabobank.
And what's not reflected here are some efforts we've made at the federal level. We've put in a request for a $4.8 million earmark, which would likely need to be spent in the fiscal year. We have language that I think I shared with you all about a $20 million allocation to Monterey Peninsula water supply projects under the Water Resource Development Act, or WRDA bill. And then we put in a grant request for a federal fisheries restoration program of, and I'm going to get this number wrong, I think it was 1.9 million or 1.8 million. And all of those are subject to committees and appropriations bills and so forth. But if they come home to roost, then, you know, we'll obviously talk about them at the mid-year budget cycle.
Next slide, Joel. So this is the revenue summary, the $32.7 million budget. As you can see, 10% comes from the water supply charge, 8% or $2.5 million from property tax, and then PWM water sales, 37%, which is 12.2. The carry forward number 4%, and then the reimbursable projects at $2.8 million, which is 9% of the budget. And then there's grants there, which is the light purple shade on the left-hand side, $2.4 million at 11%. And then another big piece is the user fee, $5.5 million, which is 17% of the budget. So those are the big slices of the pie for the revenue side. So we just show this in comparison, the sources and uses, we call them the total expenses, which is the projects and all that stuff, without the reserves are $31.3 million, and then the reserves are 1.3. So that brings it to $32.7 million, or 695. And then the district revenues, 24.3, as we showed in the detail, and then the reimbursements, 6.2. And then the carry forward and reserves again at a little over $2 million. So that makes that $32.6 million. We kind of like just show how they were all put together to match up the revenues to the expenses. Here, what we show, we like to show a 5-year revenue summary. We also have one for expenses as well. We just like to show that we are not out of line. If you can see, without the purple, we were relatively flat for the last 5 years on the revenue side. Purple is the water supply, PWM water sales. So when that hit us, yeah, that's going up. But without that, the rest of the numbers were fairly stable, fairly consistent. So it's not like our revenue was jumping up and down all over the place. Next slide, Joel. And then on the expenses side, again, the top blue one is the PWM water purchase. But apart from that, the remainder of it, the somewhat fairly level, except for the project expenses, and that's because as project expenses come in, some year it's a little bit high, some year it's a little bit low. So apart from that, the other numbers like the salaries, the benefits, operating expenses, professional fees, all of those remain relatively flat, again, on a 5-year historical trend. This is the analysis of the reserves. We basically show, Director Edwards had asked about the capital reserve. That's where it shows that we did some mid-year adjustments, and we are expecting to close the year June 30th, 2022 with the numbers on the left-hand side, $18.3 million in total. And then the one that's kind of like highlighted or shaded out, that's what is included in this proposed budget. So we are saying that we are going to be closing the year June 30th, 23 with those numbers. So no change in litigation insurance, but the capital reserve, yeah, we're adding some money, and we are also taking out some money. There's no change in flood drought, no change in debt reserve. Pension and OPEB, as I had mentioned, each year we are setting aside 100,000 each, so 200,000 in total for both of them combined. So that's going to go to $1 million. Mechanics Bank, it's going to have $500,000 in that reserve line. And then the operating reserve, which is going to change from 15.1 to 14.1. And so all in all, the total expected reserve balance at June 30th, 23 stands at $18.1 million. And that last line at the very bottom says operating reserve ending balance is projected to be 53% of the operating budget.
Yeah, and we may end up tapping the flood/drought reserve for some of these drought activities. We have budgeted outreach monies in the regular water demand budget, but going back to 2015, 16, when we did the Save Water Go Blue campaign, it was entirely funded out of the flood drought reserve. So we may come to you with a request for that purpose.
So we show this again just in a graphical form, pie chart, general operating reserve, which is about 77% of the total reserve balance. And then some other slices there, OPEB, pension, debt reserve, which are all 3, 3, and 1. And then the other bigger piece is capital reserve at 7% of the total reserve balance. So we just, same information as on the previous slide, we just show it in a pie chart. So this is the obligations commitments page. And this basically, we like to highlight that there are some of the outstanding obligations commitments. We are estimating water allocation process at 200,000, Rabobank 2.7. Again, that's without that $500,000 payment that's being planned. PWM reserve at $1.9 million. Pension obligation, as Mayor was asking, so that stands at $6.5 million. And then on the OPEB obligation, that's at $4.5 million. So all in all, total obligations commitments, you can say it's about 15.8. So we come to the closing of this, which basically the recommendation is that the board discuss this proposed 22-23 budget and give us general direction. No formal action is required at this meeting. And then we will bring back with the input comments that we received on June 20th. And that's where the board will be adopting not 21-22 budget, but 22-23 budget. Last bullet, Joel, if you could please correct it. The last bullet should read, oops. No, previous slide. Thank you.
All right.
So were there any questions that, as you staff worked on the developing the budget, were there any particular big questions or concerns that you wanted to bring to the board's attention? One thing I noticed in the portion of the packet about the district's org charts and the job descriptions, that one of the missions of in the GM's office was to develop a secure, dependable revenue stream for the district, and that surprised me to see that. So what was thinking behind that?
Yeah, so that's a holdover from about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Suresh was hired to the district in July of 2012. And I was hired to the district in September of 2012. Did I get that right? 2012?
2011. 2011 for both.
Yeah, for both. And within weeks, we realized that the district had budgeted its user fee consistently higher than its actual receipts. And the district had lost its user fee through some Public Utilities Commission proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
And that they had been spending reserves rather than reducing their expenditures.
Right.
And yeah, and so that particular phrase or goal was brought in 2012, and we went through a Prop 218 revenue raise process. It was actually a bit ugly at the time because we issued furlough notices or reduction in force notices, noting that we had no intention of firing personnel, but the path that we were on, we might run out of money before we could continue to pay the personnel. And so we went through a real difficult period where we had to fix, right the ship, so to speak. And then it was kind of Suresh and I saying, never again, let's develop a secure revenue stream. So we went and we developed that water supply charge. We went to the Supreme Court over the user fee, brought the user fee back. And then we went to the board 4 years ago with a proposal to not immediately sunset the water supply charge because we were doing projects and we felt that it was in the district's interest to collect more money than live on a shoestring. And so we've kind of turned the district around, if you will, because we focused on reliable sources of revenue that could be better predicted. And it speaks to Suresh's financial acumen and focus, and a little bit to my kind of damn the torpedoes attitude when I got in here. But Suresh and I were very like-minded. That's a holdover.
Okay, well, that's two of you have achieved quite a lot in that time. And I guess that holdover language can be retired, maybe.
Oh, I would think so. We never anticipated that there would be a successful Measure J with some unpredictable expenses to it as well. So, we've been a little hesitant to just simply sunset or reduce some of our revenue sources until projects are over and Measure J is better clarified. So.
Makes sense to me. All right, directors, Director.
Yeah, I don't have any particular comment about the budget itself, but the presentation, I think, can be a little different and maybe improved. I want to bring this up, not now, but in the outreach committee. I want to begin to discuss how we might present the growth of the district in water supply, expenses, the finances around it, the variety of things that we're doing. But I didn't like, well, and there's been a substantial increase in the size. I mean, just the last chart, about 2 charts ago, where the bar chart was showing this accelerated size of our budget, all related to water supply. Well, I think that's the story. And that's what I think ought to be promoted more than it is. And I don't know whether the budget document itself ought to have a little more information about what the program status, or what's the plural of status, for just what the district is doing year to year. But I would be looking for the budget being a trigger for outreach messaging. And I just want to look at that. I just want to put you kind of on notice that this is kind of a matter that I want to discuss more. I just hope we can do that. Just look at the bar chart. You know, it's an enormous growth in the expenditure level for this district, but it's directly related to our mission and to our success. And I think that message ought to be out there a little more than just than the way it is right now. And I just want to put everybody kind of a little bit on notice that that's going to be an agenda matter for me to pursue. I will be pursuing this. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's terrific. I mean, it's terrific. I'm not saying anything wrong. I'm just saying there's more messaging here than kind of, okay.
And I think that's a very, very good point that we will take a look at, because many agencies use their budget document as an opportunity to tell a story. And, you know, you may all have forgotten, but we've spent about 15, almost 16 million out of pocket, non-reimbursed, on the capital costs of Pure Water Monterey. And that's 12 million for the base project, 3.7-ish for the deep injection well number 4, and then $1 million in this budget for the expansion. And so we've expended on capital projects that have produced water. And then now what you're seeing is, you know, 12 million in this budget for the purchase of water that's, you know, ultimately offset by CalAm rates and the purchase water surcharge. But it is a really good story at some pretty big levels. And yeah, I don't think we do a good enough job taking advantage of this document to explain that transition.
Well, it's a really good point. I agree. We can do something with this. So let's look ahead how to do that. We can talk about it in the public outreach committee perhaps, but it is the story. As I was noticing that the expenditures chart, and what is growing a lot is the water supply, the investment in water supply. And we've got the water coming in now. So yeah, no, it's a really good point. We should follow up on it. Other comments?
Oh, I totally agree. And I've been thinking that for a while, just reading our agendas and looking at what the district is doing. There's a huge amount that we're doing for this community. And I don't think people know, and I think they need to know, just to reflect what we offer to the community. And it's very important that we let them know what we've done. Very important. So yes, thumbs up, George.
Yeah. All right. We got to figure out how to make that real. No, I mean, I'm sure that it's a lot of work just to provide the information that Suresh gives us that we need to have, but taking it to another level would be to have it tell the story of this is what the district does for the public. And this is how much money it costs, but this is what we spend the money on. This is what your user fee and so on. This is what we're doing with that money. So that's a really important point. And I think we can do it.
Yeah, we got 3.5 weeks till we need to adopt a document.
Well, I mean, we don't have to put it all on this one document. I mean, and maybe some changes could be made to this document to take some steps in that direction. We don't have to put it all. I think it's probably a longer term effort that'll be, there'll be other work products too, I think, related to that goal. You don't have to do it all over is what, from my point of view. Other comments?
We can't put this document out. It's way too detailed for, I mean, this is a great story and it's got to be told simply and directly. And I think it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Supervisor Adams, did you want to say something? No, no.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you very much. I just am agreeing with everything that you're saying. I think it's like telling the story, and I think we need to jack up the way we do it. And that's, the numbers are great. Suresh has done a beautiful job. He and Dave clearly are a good pair with this, but we just need to jazz up how we reflect it to the public.
Sounds like we are all, Director Edwards.
Nothing, I'm just waiting on public comment,
Okay.
hear from the public and call it a night, and I'll bark next month.
All right. There are very few members of the public. Let's see.
Yeah, so
Well,
if you would like to make public comment on item number 4, please raise your hand. Chair Paul, I see no raised hands.
two very loyal and faithful members of the public, but thank you for caring about this part of our work. With your help, you're part of it too. Okay, we do not have to vote on anything tonight. Is there anything more that we need to address before we adjourn? Okay, we're gonna think about this and we'll act on it at our next regular board meeting.
Yeah, and go ahead, don't use a reply all feature, but if you have questions about what you've seen as you kind of contemplate the presentation that you've just been given, send off an email copying Suresh and myself, and we'll try to get you answers so that we'll make it easier for your June meeting.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a good weekend. Be safe.
Meeting adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.